Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. It is Sunday. It is June 16th, 2 weeks till my birthday, and it is 6:40 a.m. East Coast time. We're going to break down this two-game WNBA slate that starts in the afternoon, a little 3:30 quick slate. And I want to tell you guys something that's a huge tip. Whether you're stopping in for the first time for WNBA, whether you're a seasoned WNBA vet in DFS, or you're just trying to learn more about it, play cash. That is my best advice. I've had about 8 people or so drop into certain DMs or just leave comments about how they should be approaching these slates. Look, there's not a ton of huge tournament winning slates or in terms of high prize pools. There's usually a $5,000 or a $10,000 prize pool depending on the night. And you should be playing cash, and you should be setting your own contests. And you can do that on Draftkings. It's not that hard. You just create a contest and you do it from there, because then you'll get really people who don't know what they're doing. Play cash below $5, and you will win. I've played about, in the last 2 games, like 150 cash games, and I've only lost 1. Obviously, that's a small sample size, but I haven't even scored that great of a score. It's just because I'm not playing girls who are going out there and getting 5 minutes or getting 10 minutes. I know the minutes that players are going to get, at least stable minutes in cash for 20 or more or so, and I'm not playing girls who are going to score me 0 points because people don't know that they're out. The WNBA world, in terms of playing cash, it is so lucrative. If you have any sort of knowledge in terms of who is in, who is out, and what their projections are in terms of minutes and points, you're set. You are levels above everybody else in the $5 and below range, because there's no pros. They can't see those contests. Pros cannot see below $5. They can't play in them. So you could really just pick off people down there. I have my own projections. They're on Patreon. They're literally right over here. They're linked down below for one, but they're right over here. Wherever they are, the WNBA ones, you just scroll down, you find them right here, and you can get them. I will be showing today, once again, the WA projection sheet that I use, but as of tomorrow, I'm just going to be breaking it down in terms of early interest and not showing the whole projection sheet, just because there's been about 10 people already who have bought the sheet. So thank you for those that are supporting, but also you're probably getting a very good leg up on the field in WNBA. But play cash if that answers that question. And then in terms of tournaments, sure, take your stab at the $5 tournament. That's $10,000 to first, because this is not like other sports. You're battling with 5,000 people, but it's better than battling with 50,000 people for the top prize. I don't think it's as great to be throwing all of your money in there. If you're starting out, I say just really stick only to cash. Stick to the quarter jukeboxes for 25 cents, 20 entries. So a $5 max it out, and then you can do some single entries. But for the most part, if you're playing cash with projections and knowing who is in and out, and you're not taking zeros like a lot of other people are, you're going to win a lot of money. That is why the WNBA streets are very lucrative. It is similar to how really like 8 years ago every other sport used to be. People didn't have a lot of information. There's a lack of information. Since there's a lack of information, there's an inefficient market, and those that can take advantage of that through projections will dominate. That's what happened in kind of like the NFL preseason like 3 years ago. Now it's kind of closed up because there's so much information coming out about the NFL preseason for DFS, but there's nothing still for the WNBA. You can see we're 25% of the way through the year. I think I'm one of 2 channels that does WNBA content. And that is the best quality information you're getting out of these 2 channels for the most part. So thank you. That was the long-winded way of telling you your contest selection and how you should approach WNBA. Cash is an extremely lucrative avenue to make some money, and you should just be maxing out as much as you can. With that said, my name is Sal Vetri. Welcome to the channel. I cover daily fantasy sports and all of the major fantasy sports, and we also hit on golf, WNBA. I'm excited about that. Some NFL offseason content to come. We'll be doing these videos every day. So there is a WNBA slate today, a 2-game slate at 3:30. And yeah, I'm going to be approaching it from a cash aspect. I think both games are going to offer some decent point totals, and we'll get all into that. So it's not like yesterday with Atlanta and Dallas, where there was a terrible spot that they barely hit 130 over under in that game. It's just disgusting, that we really wanted to stay away from. We don't have to worry about that today as much with 2 games. Before we get started, if you could hit the like button, it helps me out a little bit. But the thing that helps me out the most is if you can hit the subscribe button. It's totally free. It helps me build a following, which allows advertisers to say, hey, this guy's got a lot of followers. He might actually have some pretty good material out there. Let's offer him an ad to tell to his audience. It doesn't cost them $1, and it costs us $. So nothing at your expense. I can make some money off of what I'm doing. You can get some help off of my content. And then if you can hit the notification bell, that lets you know when I go live. So let's get right into it with the injury dashboard. We'll go into the target offense sheet. We'll look at the Vegas totals. I updated the pace, so now I'm projecting paces per game, which is very important. And we will go from there into the projections for today. So Jordan Canada, she got injured in the last game. She played 14 minutes. She came out. She's already ruled out for today. So this is good. Thank you, Seattle, for letting us know this in advance. Now, this is important. This is something that we have yet to really have, at least in the past couple of days, is For Seattle, a guard that plays 30 minutes per game, 30 minutes per game so far this year, again, 6 games or so, but a lot of the time on the court for Jordan Canada, a starter, is now out with an apparent knee injury. So you're going to have 30 minutes. In last game, she played 14, so kind of divvy up 16 more minutes for the rest of the guards and the rest of this team. We'll get into where those minutes are going or where I have them going and how it's going to open up some extreme value in some cases and then just some more stable stud production, in my opinion. Sydney Colson is at 3,900, somebody who plays about 14 minutes per game, didn't play in the last game. She suffered a concussion. She was not ruled out. So if you're somebody who took a dart on Sydney Colson, or more so, probably not taking a dart on her and her 10 fantasy points per game, but you're more so taking a dart on giving more minutes to other players at the guard position. Well, she played 0 minutes, so that probably paid off for you. I have her questionable today with a concussion, so she was active last time. She just didn't play. So I imagine we're not going to get that news. I imagine she'll still be active today, and we have no idea if she's going to play or not. So cross your fingers there. Really don't want to play Sydney Colson anyways due to low fantasy production, not a pretty high minutes floor. But if she's out, you can at least give those minutes elsewhere. As of right now, we probably can't do that. But as of right now, I'd lean to give the minutes elsewhere and say that she stays out with a concussion, but it's not 100%. And Jessica Shepard, this is just a reminder. She's $3,000. She's out. She's done. She tore her ACL. But this is just a reminder that this is somebody who was a decently productive player, averaging 17 fantasy points per game. Small sample, yes. Right around 19 minutes per game. She tore her ACL. It's just for the people who don't keep up with the news as much or who might not know, because you might be looking at a $3,000 player and you're not checking the injury status and say, wow, why is this player $3,000? Well, she's not playing anymore. She tore her ACL. So that is the short list. There's obviously loads of more injuries that are players that have been out all season long. They're going to hopefully we get some news in the afternoon on any players that are returning from injury out of the 15 that are just ruled out from either being overseas, away from maternity leave, whatever it might be. So that is the injury dashboard. Let's move over to the target offense sheet. Target offense sheet. I will expand this target offense sheet, but for right now, for WNBA, this is really all that I'm concerned about. And actually, what I should be doing is letting you know if there were any back-to-backs yesterday. I don't believe there were any back-to-backs yesterday, and that's something that I can just look at quickly after this. But this column, just no, N means no for back-to-back. There's 3 teams that played yesterday. I don't believe any of them are playing today, but I can be totally wrong on that after I just quickly, why not just look at this, right? Did anybody from Minnesota play last night? No. Yeah, nobody played last night. I'm like almost positive. I don't even know why I have to check this. All right, so this is what I have here, the target offense sheet. And I want to kind of explain what I'm showing you here. I just have it broken up by matchup, pace, and Vegas. Pace means how fast they're playing in the game. And this is huge, especially in the NBA this year. We saw record high paces. The faster the pace means the faster they're playing, because pace just means more possessions. Pace is literally, when you see 76.7, this number right here, that's how many possessions they're getting per game. So if it's a higher number that they're getting more possessions, that means they're just playing at a faster pace, and obviously the more possessions usually leads to the more fantasy points. So I have an algorithm that I pretty much project the pace in that game. So when these two teams play each other, how much higher or how much lower will the pace be based on how the teams play each other compared to the league pace. So Seattle and Connecticut today, they're two teams that have right around a middling pace. There's only 12 teams in the league, so they're nothing outstanding, they're nothing terrible. So they're right around both a 77 pace. The pace for this game I have at 77.3. So it's a slight downtick, about 1.5 less possessions for Connecticut is projected in this game, and 1.5 more for Seattle. So what you do there is you just give a little bit of a bump to the Seattle players. They're going to be playing at a faster pace, which means that they're going to have more opportunities than they usually do. The Vegas total, they're not out yet. They're never out until like 2 hours before the game. That's what stinks about the WNBA. And the reason is nobody wants to bet on the WNBA because it is an inefficient market. It means that nobody has the information, but it's so tough to get the information when they don't put the games on TV. When they have one beat writer per team, you're pretty much betting on stuff that you don't know anything about. So professional bettors want to have information about what they're betting on to try and take advantage of the inefficient market. This is an inefficient market, yes, but there's no information out there. If you try and find a WNBA game on TV, you're lucky if you find like one every few weeks, let alone the many that are playing throughout that time. So yeah, that's why the Vegas odds won't be out for a while. It kind of takes them a long time to figure it out. So I'm just doing what I'm pretty much doing here is trying to factor in pace, add up the team totals for the year that they've been averaging, divided by or add them up. That gets you your team total for the game, and then factor in pace any way in which I can. So I have around a 155, I guess you can call it a 157 for Seattle and Connecticut today, as their over-under, with Connecticut being the team that Does have the higher team total in this one, so I have them actually being favorited. And then Las Vegas versus Minnesota. This is pretty obvious. Vegas I have favored by like 10 points right now. There is blowout potential here. This should be the game that has the higher over-under. You're going to have Las Vegas playing at one of the highest paces, I believe the highest pace in the league, at an 84 possessions per game. This is 6 more than Minnesota usually sees, so it's going to be a pace down spot for Minnesota, or for Las Vegas, because they're playing a slow team in Minnesota. So 82 possessions per game is what I have projected here, which gives Minnesota a huge bump up. So if you're interested in playing Minnesota players today, just know that they're going to see probably around 6 to 10, if not more, possessions extra in this game, which goes a long way, especially in fantasy. You're probably going to get some players a little bit underpriced based on the matchup that they're playing in. So yes, blowout concern is there, but also it's a nice pace up spot for Minnesota. So let's move over to the projections. And as we do, I just want to remind everybody, I have so far today 40 players projected. I usually knock out the injured ones and players that don't see really any run. So with that being said, you can go over to Patreon. It's linked down below. These are things that I do by myself. Patreon is just a site that supports creators. It's not like my own website. I want to make that quickly. Somebody is helping me, but I'm being very lazy and just doing other things right now. Maybe not lazy, but just getting caught up in a lot of other things before getting into the site. But these are my projections. I do them every single morning / night whenever the slate comes out, and break down into the minutes projections. The most important things are DVP, minutes projections, and then finding a point per minute. That's how I come up with my projections. I factor in Vegas, I factor in pace and all that other stuff, but those are much easier to find. There's a lack of information on DVP. There's a lack of information on really minutes in general and starters for teams, and there's sort of a lack of information on point per minute to an extent. So that's where we're at. This is what I'm looking at, and I just want to go over a couple of girls that I'm interested in today. Again, it's a 4-team slate, a 2-game slate. I'm not going to come out here and give you 10 plays because there's, or 10 people that I find interesting, because there's realistically, that's probably like what my player pool comes down to. I'll probably have like a 12 to 14 girl player pool at most to try and put into my cash lineups and filter it down from there. But I'll kind of hit on maybe 2 guards and 2 forwards or so, 5 total people that I find interesting, albeit might not all find their way into my lineup. I think Jonquel Jones at the top here at $10,900. She's the second most expensive player in the slate, only behind Natasha Howard today. But I think I prefer Jones here. I prefer Jones for more raw points. And look, this is not that far off. They're $400 in price difference. I have them playing the same minutes. I just have Jones being a little bit more productive here. About a similar matchup between her and Howard. Obviously playing in the same game, so they get the same game total, but I think that her team scores a little bit more. I think they get a little bit more of a pace bump here. So Jonquel Jones barely, it's only 2 points more than Natasha Howard. If you were going to go for these 10K plus players, I do prefer Jones over everybody. Now Liz Cambridge in the last game I was very high on. She only comes out and plays 17 minutes, but that was because that game was a blowout, right? A 35-point or a 40-point blowout is just ridiculous. Now today I do fear that there's more blowout potential against Minnesota. Again, a bottom half team in the league against the Vegas, one of the better teams in the league. So Cambridge, if she can just find her way to stay onto the court, and realistically the way that she will do that is if this game stays close. She played 25 minutes 2 games ago, battling back from an injury and returning from an injury, and then she goes back down to 17, not because of her injury or because she's a bad player, that's not true at all, because of the blowout. If this game stays close and you're somebody who believes it stays close, Cambridge probably sees like 30 minutes in this game, and if that's 30 minutes, and I give her 30 minutes here, and I'll bump these up to 30, well, now she's seeing 40 fantasy points in this game. Again, at $10,400, that's probably the one that I would prefer in the 10+ K range. But as of right now, I can't project her for a full 30. I have her for 28. And yes, those 2 points do, or those 2 minutes do matter because it allocates to around 3 fantasy points as a median. So Jonquel Jones is the top tier, the 5-figure price person that I am interested in the most today. As we scroll a little bit more down, look, at 9.5, I think that your cash play, and here's the thing, for cash lineups and tournament lineups in WNBA, they realistically should be the same thing more times than not. You can maybe put a safer option into your cash lineups and your tournament lineups here and there, but you don't have to take too many risks in GPPs for WNBA because nobody knows what the hell a risk is or what the hell a safe play is for the most part out of the field. Like I would say, honestly, 3/4 of the field have no idea what they're doing. 3/4 of the field is definitely not using projections. At least I don't believe so. But Kayla McBride is probably as safe as you'll get. 30 minutes is pretty stable for her. She averages 28 on the year. Have her for 30 today. If this game stays close, you should see 30 or more. She's a 1.06 fantasy point per minute producer on the season. Have her projected for 1.02 today. So what does that get you? Get you a little over 30 fantasy points in a matchup that should have the highest total on the slate. So Kayla McBride at $9,500. She's pricey, yes, but she's probably the most safe play, I would say, in the 9K plus range. Even including the 10K plus range players, and only because of her price point, when you're getting $1,000+ off in price, it's a lot easier to have a safe ceiling, or a safe point total. For her, if she hits 30 points, if she hits 28 points for you, that's safe on a slate like this where there's only a certain amount of players who can get to that when there's only 4 teams playing. Whereas a 10K plus player, really, if they're not getting you in the 40-point range, they kind of bust for you. And I don't really think Sylvia Fowles is not somebody I have projected for that 40-plus range. Liz Cambage, due to not giving her a full minutes allocation here, because I don't like to project blowouts, but in the WNBA, the skill gap between the top teams and these bottom teams is much different than the NBA, so I think it makes a little bit more sense to. I don't have her projecting for 40 points, so yeah, I think that Kayla McBride is definitely a nice option. Even for a little bit cheaper, Courtney Williams grades out for the same amount of fantasy points as McBride, and she's $300 cheaper. You can go either way there. Courtney Williams might provide more security in terms of the game staying closer, which allows her to get her full minutes over McBride. The person, though, that's a little bit cheaper at $8,900 here, that if you're telling me somebody in the 8K and above range to play more times than not, it would probably be McBride in terms of cash lineups. But Jewell Loyd today is right there as well. Jewell Loyd at 8,900, have her projecting for 30.5 points today. I have her seeing her ceilings, sort of her ceiling in minutes today, 34, but realistically, there's more to go around. Look, Jordan Canada is not in today. That's her teammate who runs alongside of her, averages 25 fantasy points per game, gets around 30 minutes per game, and now she's not in this game today. And now Jewell Loyd, the other starting guard who sees around 33 minutes per game, should get a minutes bump. I have her at 34. Realistically, I should be doing 35 or so out of these 40 minutes for Jewell Loyd today, and she's going to get those minutes a lot more secure than ever because another starting guard on the team that is very productive is out. So Jewell Loyd, I think that she sees a productivity bump here. And actually, I want to give her a little bit more of a productivity bump as we look at this. And now that I give her a productivity bump, let me filter this again so it goes by the total fantasy points because she moves up a little bit over other people. I gave her a minutes bump but not as much a productivity bump. She grades out as one of the best plays on the slate. $8,900 Jewell Loyd for me today, grades out at 31.7 fantasy points. That is the 4th highest score, a virtual tie with like 3 other players, again, tenths of a point off. But Jewell Loyd at $8,900, again, part of this is because I feel confident in securing her at 34 minutes, which is really the most minutes that she's seen. She's seen it many of times. Like she's played 7 games. She's seen 34 minutes like 4 times, right? But I feel confident locking that in without Jordan Canada out there. And there's realistically room for more improvement from that. So Jewell Loyd, my favorite play on the slate, like above 8K. If we go down a little bit more, Alicia Clark at $7,000. Look, I projected for 28 minutes. That's what she usually sees on the year, maybe a little bit under. She's averaging 28.6 minutes per game. I have her projected at 28 minutes today in a game that, it's a little bit of a tougher matchup at her position against Connecticut. But there's nothing there that scares me. $7,000 is just too cheap for this player, especially on a 2-game slate. I have her projecting out for 24.8 fantasy points. And if you're telling me that she's $7,000, I'm going to take that all day. You're not going to find another player at least $7,000 or below that going to project out for 25 or more fantasy points, which is pretty much what Clark checks out for at $7,000 flat. That is a very good value play in my opinion. If we go down a little bit more, Dantas is somebody that was on last game, continues to see big minutes, averaging 28 minutes on the year. I have her projected for 28 minutes today against Las Vegas in a huge pace-up spot, probably around 10 possessions extra in this game for Minnesota. Dantas I have her projected at, again, 28 minutes today and 23.7 fantasy points for a player who is 6,100. That is grossly underpriced in my opinion. Dantas should be touching like $6,800 in my opinion based on the amount of minutes and the stable minutes that she's been playing over the past few games. So Dantas I like at $6,100 as sort of your lower option. $7,000 Clark is a little bit too cheap. When you're going up, I think Jonquel Jones in the 10K range is my favorite player today. Jewell Loyd becomes one of my favorite GPP plays and really cash games as well because of the stable minutes. Courtney Williams and McBride, they're kind of a toss-up there. I probably prefer McBride just due to safety, but if you really want to take into account that game could blow out and get ugly and she only sees 24 minutes instead of 30 plus, then Courtney Williams would be the one that I would go to more so than often, and that probably means more of a safer cash play McBride, who usually is a staple cash play for us, just due to the nature of the matchup. Might be more of a tournament play today as we think about it more and more. Another play that I will hit on, a couple of them actually. So Lexi Brown, I think, is too cheap at $4,800. She averages 22 minutes per game. I think she sees a couple more minutes today. I have her at 24 just on the nature of some injuries and the way that her minutes have been trending. But she has a huge place-up spot again against Las Vegas. And really, if this game blows out, it probably helps Lexi Brown more so than anything. She has a good matchup at the guard position against Las Vegas. I have her projected out for 20 fantasy points today. Look, 20 fantasy points is nothing great, but at $4,800, you're way too cheap if you're going to project out for 20 fantasy points. Nobody else below $5,000 or $5,000 or below is projected out for that many points. So extreme value, $4,800 Lexi Brown could pay off. Look, I'm projecting 20 points. I'm not telling you that this is definitely going to happen. She could go out there and see, again, it's a WNBA, and outside of the top 3 best players in the team, or maybe 4, the minutes are not that stable. She can go out there today. Instead of continuing to see these minutes, they just cut her down to 16. They give somebody else a run, and she scores 12 fantasy points. But based on what we've been seeing, it seems like her minutes are stabilizing out, and she gets a nice pace-up spot here in the game that probably will end up having the highest total on the slate. One more player that I will touch on, and this is somebody that I don't really want to get to, but I think it's interesting to at least note. Sammy Whitcomb on Seattle is a guard, and we already talked about Canada being out. So there's 30 minutes to go around for the guards, and Sammy Whitcomb saw an 8-minute bump to 19 minutes, the highest that she's seen in the last game. Now, keep in mind, Canada still played 14 minutes in that game. So there's still 14 minutes to go around to the Seattle team, and most likely to the guard position. So I'm not giving them all to Sammy Whitcomb, but some of them are going to go to Whitcomb. Some of them are going to go to some other players at the bottom of the Seattle roster. But Whitcomb, I do have playing the most minutes that she's seen at 22. I have that projected, and really I think there's a ceiling for 24 minutes in there today. It depends who starts. If you get Whitcomb starting today for Canada, and I think that this is a very real possibility, I probably bump Whitcomb up to around 26 minutes, which would be the highest that she has played on the year by like 7 minutes. If you give her 26 minutes today, she grades out for 21 fantasy points, and she's $4,500. So keep in mind, we're basing this off of a very small sample size of 40 minutes total. But I think it's very important to keep this all in mind, that going towards the game, this is going to be one of the biggest things for this slate. Luckily, the game's at 3:30, so we'll know this news hopefully early. Maybe we can reach out to some of the. I'll do that. Follow me on Twitter at @SalVetcherDFS, and I'll reach out to the Seattle beat writer and see if there's anything on the starters there. But Sammy Whitcomb is very much in line to start as sort of this next man up at the guard position for Seattle. If that's the case, then yeah, I give her a bump in minutes, and at $4,500, a starting guard that's going to play 25 minutes or so should be in your lineups, and definitely in cash and probably in tournaments as well. So that's a spot that people probably have no idea is even potentially out there today in terms of a starter coming in and seeing more minutes in the WNBA, because nobody's going to freaking report it. There's no fantasy lab, so that's a spot that I say keep an eye on. Whitcomb, if she doesn't start, is still interesting, probably more so in cash. I projects out at 17.8 points, but if she does start, she's going to be projecting out for around 20 fantasy points at 4,500, which is a bottom tier number. So that's where I'm at right now. We touched on some of the upper tier range, the 8K to 9K range. We named about 3 players. In that 7K range, it's really just Alicia Clark for me. You can kind of toy around with other players. Collier is interesting for me, but I'd rather go down to Clark for the $900 savings. I think Collier is fine if you have the money, though. Dantas in the 6K range is what I kind of want to get to. I didn't really touch on other people in the 4K range. We touched on Lexi Brown, and Whitcomb is very important to see if she's starting. Then I probably have a lot more interest in her for stable minutes and production over Brown for a cheaper price point. And then we didn't really touch on a couple other players in the 6K or below range. Mercedes Russell, I have projecting out nicely today. I have her seeing a big bump in minutes. She saw another bump. She was another player to see more minutes in that last game. She's not a guard, but she saw more minutes once Canada went out. I have her projecting out for a season high 30 minutes, which is where we've seen her trending. If that's the case, you get 22 fantasy points out of her. I'd say that's a riskier spot at 5,700 because she can very much see 24 minutes today, and then that's not worth it, at least at that price point in terms of the value that I'm saying that she gets. And Danielle Robinson at 0.89 fantasy points per minute at 6,600. Have her projecting out for her season average in minutes at 25 today. Grades out decently, nothing spectacular, 22.7, kind of middle of the pack, but at least she's cheaper. So that's my thoughts so far in this 2-game slate. I think the biggest news that we have to watch for is Sammy Whitcomb, or just more so, who is the 5th starter in place of Jordan Canada for Seattle. If it is somebody like Sammy Whitcomb who has a decent point per minute production at 0.82, probably sees a hit playing next to Jewel Lloyd. But either way, I think that Canada already being out is good news to have, and I think it's going to only really help the players like Natasha Howard's production overall from Seattle, but more so at the same position, Jewel Lloyd's production and assist rate should go up. So thank you. My name is Sal Vetri. If you're interested in getting these full projections for today and for really the rest of the month, I have them on Patreon. They're not expensive at all. They're $14.99, but again, there's only 2 months in the WNBA season, so if you just want them for 1 month, you can. If you want them for both months, You can go with that route as well. So I don't know if any other places really offer projections daily for WNBA. I'm sure like Awesemo does or somebody, but this is what I'm doing. You can support the small business, small local channels. But thank you. Hit the subscribe button before you go. Comment down below. What do you like about these videos? What would you like to see more of? And hit that notification bell. My name's Sal. Best of luck to everybody. Peace out, gang.